Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to be rating some of your drafts according to certain factors such as squad depth, fixtures, the personnel and more. If you do enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, I rated some of your drafts just over a week ago, and lots of people enjoy these videos because you get to see some different drafts, and I always try to select drafts with a talking point, something a little bit different. And even if I'm not getting to rate your draft specifically, because obviously I get like 1,000 drafts sent in, which is amazing, but I can only rate a few in these videos, hopefully I'm still talking about some of the players that you have and some of the structure ideas that you've had as well. To try and make this a little bit more structured rather than just me rambling on about it, I've also tried to rate these drafts according to 5 different categories. So on the left-hand side, you can see category and rating. The rating is genuinely quite arbitrary. I've just sort of just giving it a rating based on my initial instinct. But the things that I'm rating it according to are structure. So what is the general structure like? Have you got major price points covered? Is the money spread too thin? Is it in too few positions? I'm then looking at expected minutes. Do you have largely nailed on assets with very few sort of rotation risks? I've got fixtures as well, because someone like Bruno Fernandes is a brilliant player, but the fixtures aren't there. So are you targeting those early fixtures? Squad depth, so we're looking a little bit about the bench here. Have you got 15 good players rather than just 11? I've then put risk factor. This one's a little bit strange. The rating isn't relevant to how much risk you've taken per se. It's like, have you taken a bit of risk, but not too much? So the perfect amount of risk would be 100, where you've taken a little bit. But if you've taken absolutely no risk and it's just a super sort of boring standard team, then that's also not a particularly high rating. But if you've taken too much risk, then it might be too much. So it's basically kind of my personal opinion about have you taken the right amount of risk. I've then averaged those all together and then given an overall rating based on that according to me. But not only that, we also have the rating from Fantasy Football Hub. So you're going to have 2 ratings for each of the drafts today. And you can get your team rated for free by Fantasy Football Hub as well. So if you are not one of the 5 people that have had their drafts rated today, but you kind of want a bit of feedback, all you need to do is use the link down below, and you can do this completely for free on your phone or on desktop. Upload your draft to Fantasy Football Hub, and it will give you a rating out of 100, a percentage, and some projected points. So you can do that completely free. If you also want to sort of scan through and go through the different game weeks, if you want access to Opta statistics, player profiles, and much more, fixture analyzer, you can do that as well using the link down below to get 50% off. You might as well get a free team rating, because why not? It just at least gives you a bit of feedback. But if you do want to check it out in a bit more detail, there'll also be a link down below to get 50% off. So this draft, as things stand, that was sent in by FPL Bunga, was rated at 95% according to Fantasy Football Hub. So they really, really like this draft. I still like it, but I do think there are some holes in it, which we'll discuss. So what it is essentially a freemium draft. So there are 3 big premiums. So this draft has Salah, Palmer, and Haaland. So to read it out, we've got Kelleher in goal at 4.5 million. We've then got Colwill, Nico Williams and Van der Ven as the back 3. The midfield 5 is Ndiaye, Palmer, Anderson, Salah, Rodgers, which in all honesty, I've had that exact midfield 5 quite a few times. And then it's Haaland and Welbeck. The bench is Darlow, Guiu, I think is how you pronounce his name. The new £4.5 million forward for Sunderland. Steve and Ronaldo. We'll call him Ronaldo. So but essentially, the bench is super, super weak. That was the first thing that I noted when I looked at this draft is, oh, that is a weak bench. But assuming that Guiu actually starts for Sunderland in the near future, I don't think he'll start game week 1, by the way. It doesn't sound like according to Sunderland fans. But assuming he does start to play for them more regularly, those 2 4 million defenders I would expect to play as well, especially as Steve. Darlow looks like he'll start the season as first choice. You've also got Dubravka, by the way, who looks like he might be moving to Burnley. You can get away with a super cheap bench that do play, but that is certainly the limitation of a freemium draft. Unless you also pull money out of the starting 11, that bench is incredibly weak, which is why I've rated the squad depth at 65 out of 100. That is the real weakness here. However, if you can look past the bench, that starting 11, it doesn't look hugely compromised considering you've got Palmer, Salah and Haaland in it. Like, you've still got Morgan Rodgers and Ndiaye, right? So you've got a 6.5. They're really solid. You could even go for Ismail Assar or Kudus. I like that price point. Rodgers is fantastic. And then it's not like you've had to go for Beto in the starting 11. You've still gone out there and get Danny Welbeck as well, who I think is really good. Anderson at 5.5. I like the 5.5 midfielders. So yes, technically, if you look into it a bit more detail, you've got 4 starting attackers under the price of 6.5. You've also got a very cheap defense as well, right? So you've got no Virgil van Dijk, no Gvardiol. Your most expensive defender here is 2 5 million defenders. So I guess the more you look into it, at first you look at that and go, actually, that's not that compromised. But then you go, lots of cheap attackers, no premium defenders, no bench. This is why, for me, I'm struggling to make the freemium work, because I just don't see how you have everything that you need to have. But of course, the benefit is that you have the 3 best players. But for example, what would I do to make this draft better if I'm trying to give a little bit of advice on the freemium? I would probably drop Morgan Rogers down. Now, that is tough because he's one of the things that I like about this draft. But if you drop Morgan Rogers down to someone like Marlon, right? Marlon, by the way, is a big risk. It would increase the risk factor in this draft massively. It would give you one more player that you just don't know about minutes. But if you dropped Rogers down to Marlon, that gives you 1.5 million. Immediately, you can go Colwill to Van Dijk, which I think is a big upgrade, and then even Kelleher to Sanchez. All of a sudden, if this team had Sanchez and Van Dijk in there, it looks a lot better. Or Rogers down to Marlon and then upgrade your bench a little bit. Maybe you can get Guiu up to a 5.5 million like Pirro or Beto. Maybe you can get one of your bench players up to a 4.5 defender. I just feel like at the moment, of course, the money is really concentrated in 3 positions, but it also leaves the bench a little bit weak and the defense a little bit weak. So for that reason, I've given this an 85 overall, an 8.5 out of 10. Fantasy Football Hub loves it, and I get it, because if you look at the 3 players with the highest projected points, it is Haaland, Salah, and Palmer. So I can understand why a model or an algorithm would like this a lot. Let me know what you think on this draft. Let me know down below if anyone is considered going for the freemium, and if you feel like you have created a better draft with those 3 premium assets. I like this a lot, though. I'm definitely not going to hate on it. Let's look at the other 4 drafts and see if any of them are slightly better. So draft number 2 is a 1.5 million in the bank team. And it's one of the first that I've seen where someone's left money in the bank. And I can understand it this year in particular, because the pricing in previous seasons, especially if you go back 2 or 3 seasons now, it was so incredibly kind that you could build an insane starting 11, a strong bench, and leave money in the bank. But the pricing this year, let me know what you think of the pricing. I wouldn't go as far as saying that it is too difficult to build a squad, but it is certainly more difficult than in recent seasons. I have not built a single team that I'm fully happy with, and I've definitely not felt like at any point I can leave money in the bank. However, I think this is an incredibly viable strategy, and I'd like to explain why, rather than necessarily just focusing on the players, but we will, of course, discuss them. What I love about leaving money in the bank is we don't really account for price changes too much when we select players. So, for example, I think the £7.5 million forward pool is going to be really interesting. You've got Wissa, Wood, João Pedro, Mateta. Havertz could even get more minutes than people expect. There are more that I've forgotten off the top of my head, but there are really good 7.5 million forwards. There are at least 5 of them. So you might state, for example, in this draft, I'm going to start with Wood and João Pedro, and if a better 7.5 million forward arises, I will move to them. The issue with that, if Wood and João Pedro are not the best 7.5s, let's say they have really tough starts to the season, maybe their minutes are lower than you expect, maybe they don't get the minutes that you want, they would probably slightly drop in price. And let's say Johan Wissa moves to Newcastle, he starts banging in the goals, he'll go up to 7.7 really quick. All of a sudden, yes, you have the price point of 7.5 covered, but you can't move to another 7.5 unless that player hasn't gone up and unless your player hasn't dropped, or you make obviously 2 transfers to free up funds. So the way to deal with that, there's 2 ways. One of the reasons I selected Jared Bowen in one of my recent drafts is he's priced at 8 million. So as I said in that video, if I want to move from Bowen to a 7.5, even if the 7.5 I want to go and get has done incredibly well and Bowen has done really badly, I still probably will be able to afford it because Bowen is 0.5 more. So one way you can deal with this issue is by owning players that are slightly above a price point that you think will be very popular. I'll use Morgan Rogers as another really good example here. Morgan Rogers is 7 million. There aren't many other good 7 million mids, but there are quite a few I like at 6.5. Again, if Rogers doesn't do well at the start of the season, he's at a lovely price point where you can downgrade him to those other 6.5s. So that's one way of dealing with it. The other way that you can deal with it is just leaving a bit of money in the bank at the start of the season. It doesn't have to be 1.5, it could be 0.5. Because then again, you can account for possible price changes. So a bit of a rambly start to that draft, just to say I do really quite like the idea of leaving money in the bank. All I would say on this is don't do it if you feel like it is at a massive detriment to your team. Don't ever leave money in, like points are much more important than flexibility and money in the bank. So if you feel like that extra 1.5 would go a massively long way, I would use it. But when I look at this draft, Two 4.5 goalkeepers. You've got Murillo, Van Dijk, Branthwaite, Richards. So really decent sort of defensive coverage. Salah, Gakpo, and Jai Rodgers. That's a really nice midfield four. And then Wood, João Pedro, Watkins. I looked at this and thought, do you know what I actually did? And this is a good sign for this draft, is I actually just plugged it into Fantasy Football Hub. I uploaded the screenshot to make sure that it had 1.5 million in the bank, because I was like, it doesn't look like a draft, particularly for me at least, where there is 1.5 million. I guess the reason there is 1.5 is it's got no Palmer, right? So a lot of people would have a similar-ish draft, but would have Palmer in there, and all of a sudden that's very expensive. So technically you've dropped that second premium down to like a Watkins. But really, other than that, unless you think that Palmer is absolutely essential, then it could be worth doing. So structure-wise, I've given it 90 because it has that flexibility. You've still got some expensive price points covered. In fact, you've got pretty much every price point that you'd want really covered in that team. Minutes-wise, there are some minutes risks. I think Gakpo he's looking really good in pre-season. His minutes could be better than I expect, but you're still not getting 90 minutes every week from Gakpo. I think Chris Wood's minutes might drop this season. That famous last words, he's probably going to score and play 90 in every game, but his minutes could drop. João Pedro is a slight risk as well. So the minutes for me are a little bit lower on this draft. Squad depth, again, the bench is a little bit weak, but not, I guess, terrible. And I like the amount of risk in this team. I think it's got a couple of nice picks like Gakpo, like João Pedro, but there are still a lot of nailed assets that you would expect to do well. It came out an overall rating for me when I averaged those 5 categories as 82. I would maybe give it slightly more. Fantasy Football Hub still has this as 94% rated, so you can still do well and build a team that looks good, having a little bit of money in the bank. So yeah, it's an alternative strategy. Let me know if anyone else has managed to leave it. What I would say, final thing on this, if you're going to leave money in the bank, probably leave 0.5. I would leave a little bit just to account for price changes. I think the guy that sent this in said that it was to maybe be able to do Wood or João Pedro to someone like a Gyökeres potentially. But as I said, if Gyökeres goes all guns blazing and João Pedro and Wood don't do well, you're going to need probably 2 million at that stage to make the change. So there you go, a bit of a discussion around money in the bank. I don't mind it. Let's move on to draft 3. So draft number 3, I've called Haaland Exists. And of course, we had Haaland in the first draft, but that was alongside Salah. And of course, there will be a few people that have Haaland only drafts, but I'm not seeing many of them. It's normally, if you have Haaland, it's a Haaland and Salah draft. So I thought I would just bring back up the possibility of you can go with just Haaland. Always starts the season well. I really like the midfielders. Like you can see here, this midfield is unbelievable because you free up a spot and some money by dropping Mohamed Salah. So this is possible. I've actually rated this myself at 90. When I went through each of the categories, I was like, yes, it's a good structure. Yes, the minutes are good. Yes, you're kind of targeting the fixtures, although a couple of slightly weaker players. The squad is really, really deep, as we'll discuss, and you're taking some risks. So when I go through my framework of what makes a good draft, this has a lot of it. So Sanchez and Verbruggen as the 2 goalkeepers. It does sound now, by the way, like Verbruggen will be fit to start the season, which is good news if you were looking to go for him. There's a back 3, Williams, Anderson, Van Dijk, with Konsa and a Steve on the bench. So you've got really decent back 5 there. The midfield 5 I love. Matoma, Wirtz, Palmer, Rodgers, Anderson. And then the 3 forwards are Haaland, Bowen, and Strand Larsen. This is again one of those where I was like, that doesn't look like it should be in budget, which is always a really good sign. Some of the picks that I love in here, Strand Larsen, really underrated because that Game Week 1 fixture. But if you're not bench boosting in Game Week 1, and by the way, this team would look pretty decent for a bench boost in Game Week 2, then you could just obviously bring him in from Game Week 2. Jared Bowen, I think, is incredibly underrated. 8 million is a little bit on the expensive side, but again, he's at that really nice price point. Matoma is a player that I am looking at more and more at 6.5 now. Could I go for him as an alternative? Could I try and squeeze him into my team? Because his minutes always tend to be good. I think Brighton will have a good season. I don't mind their opening fixtures. Matoma's another really decent shout. Florian Wirtz to sort of, I don't believe in cover, but you're covering the Liverpool attack in the sense that if Liverpool start incredibly well and score tons of goals, you would hope that Wirtz is at least semi-involved in that. And listen, Salah hasn't looked brilliant in the entirety of 2025, I would say. And Liverpool fans will be really upset when I say that. But from an FPL perspective, his underlying numbers dropped, his goal threat dropped, his creativity's been brilliant. In the last pre-season game, Salah created, I think, 3 or 4 big chances and he had 6 key passes. But his goal threat has dropped a little bit. And we've seen with Florian Wirtz, he's been on pretty much all set pieces, corners and free kicks. So for 6 million cheaper, I get it. And again, Haaland is brilliant. Like you don't need me to sit here and say that Haaland will probably score a lot of goals this season. See, I genuinely really like this draft. I struggle to have many major criticisms of it. I think it's perfectly viable. Don't be scared to go against one player, because if it goes well, it can go really well. But obviously, this is risk reward. There is a huge risk, because if Salah starts the season better than you expect and Haaland starts slowly, given Salah's ownership, it's not game over, but it could be a really poor start to the season. So you have to weigh that up for yourself. Let me know what you think of this Haaland only draft, but I am a big fan. So for draft number 4, we've got a really deep squad, but not a silly deep squad. So I've seen somewhere it's like so spread around that you've got like 3-6 millions on the bench. I don't think you need to do that, but this is very much 15 players, not 11. This is making sure that every player that exists in your team is good. So no 4 million defenders, no 4 million goalkeepers, no 5 million midfielders. So your cheapest attacker is 5.5. And then there's a couple of 6.5s. Your cheapest defenders are 4.5s, and you've got a 4.5 goalkeeper. So again, you are probably spending 2 or 3 million more on your bench than you need to, but to give you 15 really good players. And I think if you go for this 15, not 11, you probably are going without Haaland and Salah. There is a world where you maybe drop one of, for example, in this team, Bruno or Watkins down, and you could probably squeeze Salah in, and then maybe it'll look a little bit weaker. But I think if you want to go for this strong squad approach, you just drop both of them. What's the worst that could happen, right? So this team has Sanchez and Kelleher as the 2 goalkeepers, Van Dijk, Van de Ven, Milenkovic, who, by the way, I think is very underrated. Lots of people go Murillo or Williams. Murillo good for DEFCON, Williams cheaper, but Milenkovic is decent for DEFCON and also very, very attacking from set pieces. So I like Milenkovic. Juve and Konsa. Juve for me is a player that really stands out. If I end up back on Bench Boost 1, which I may well do, Juve will be probably in my team. He's been so attacking in pre-season. Last season for Slavia Prague, I think he had 7 goals and 2 assists in the league. So this is a man that can get forward, and he has a beautiful left foot, by the way. In the game against Bournemouth, he had an assist and a pre-assist. His crosses that he was whipping in were so, so good. So I really like that back 5. You then got, and this is what it can look like if you drop Salah and Haaland, Palmer, Marlon, Fernandes, Saka, and Jai. So you've got Palmer, Fernandes, and Saka as those sort of premium assets. I really don't want to get Bruno in. We're going to discuss Bruno in the next section a little bit more, but it looks really, really solid. And then you've got Bowen, Welbeck, Watkins as the front 3. You've got every price point covered apart from the 2 expensive players in Salah and Haaland. You've got some really nice players there, most of them pretty nailed for minutes. You've got a few decent penalty takers in there. You've got a little bit of risk. I think this kind of squad would... This is what I love about FPL in this preseason, by the way. There's not a template emerging. Well, at least not for me. I'm not seeing a template emerging. I look at content creators. Everyone's going a different strategy. I look at teams. Yeah, there are some common picks. For example, Watkins seems popular. So does Van Dijk. But largely, the template isn't emerging yet. Now, we have 10 days until game week 1, so maybe it will start to, but I'm really enjoying it. And I think this kind of strategy, it is high risk, but it's also high reward as well, because if Salah and Haaland do start a little bit slow, you don't even need them to blank, by the way, but just 1 goal every couple of games, or maybe in the opening 5, they get 3 or 4 goals. That might not be enough to justify their price tag, especially if the alternative players you pick do really well. So I really like this approach. Let me know if you're on a no Salah, no Haaland team with a deeper squad. And yeah, I mean, you could comfortably bench boost in 1. You could bench boost in 2. With this team, it might even look good for a bench boost 3 if you just change 1 or 2 players around. So I've called draft number 5. We don't talk about Bruno, and we should have a bit of a chat about Bruno. I'm getting lots of questions. I'm obviously a Manchester United fan. I would normally have any excuse I can to get a Manchester United asset in my team, and I've had Dorgu in a lot of my drafts. And honestly, watching Manchester United the other night against Everton, I know they drew 2-2, by the way, and I know at points we looked awful. And Bruno in general, he had a bit of a sloppy game. He gave the ball away a hell of a lot, but he also looked really dangerous going forward. We know now that he's first choice penalty taker. He's taken 2 penalties in pre-season. He took one with Cunha and Mbeumo on the pitch, which Ahmad won, so it wasn't even like Bruno won the pen. So Bruno's first choice penalty taker. What I was also surprised at is Bruno's still taking a lot of set pieces. I love Bruno Fernandes. I think Bruno Fernandes is top 5 midfielders in world football, and you can all laugh at me in the comments. That's absolutely fine. I think he's that good. His set-piece delivery is rubbish. I genuinely believe that. If you're a United fan, let me know if you agree. He never beats the first man from corners. From free kicks, it's like 1 in 10 looks good. As soon as Cunha and Mbeumo join, who, by the way, have exceptional set-piece delivery, I was convinced he'd be off them, but he's still taken a lot of them. And he's talismanic. And, by the way, he's been playing a lot of time as the sort of number 10 in the team. There is a world if we don't sign Sesko and we can't go and get Watkins and we don't get a forward, where Bruno, Mbeumo and Cunha as the front 3 for Man United. Bruno could play as the false 9, he could play off the left, off the right. So I really do think he'll have a fantastic season. And he's pretty good for defensive contributions. On average, he's only just below that 12 mark for CBI-RT, which midfielders need to achieve to get the 2 FPL points. So do I think Bruno Fernandes will have a great season? Yeah, absolutely. I would be very surprised if he doesn't hit 180 FPL points, which probably means he's worth 9 million. But for me, in a lot of my teams, it's either Fernandes or Watkins. And I just don't know that I can sit there and justify Fernandes over Watkins when I look at the opening fixtures. The fixtures really aren't great for United. And there are still so many question marks. Might he drop into a deeper role? Might we see a bit of a penalty share? Yes, Bruno's taken them so far. But is there a world if Cunha and Mbeumo aren't off to a hot start? We've seen it in the past, by the way. Fernandes gave Rashford a penalty before. He might have given Martial one, if I remember correctly. He is a leader. He is a team player generally. He isn't scared to give a penalty to a player. So, yeah, and maybe his set-piece delivery of it continues to look pretty poor. Maybe they will step in. So there are still question marks. And Man United still aren't a fantastic team. As much as we look good at points in the attack against Everton, there are still question marks. So as much as I do love him, and by the way, if you pick Fernandes in your team, good luck to you. I hope he smashes it. And I may well still find a way to get him in. But he is still expensive, and there are question marks. And this team here has got Salah, Fernandes, Watkins, and Palmer. Great. But it's also got a weaker bench than I would want. No defenders at 6 million either, which again I think is a little bit of a limitation. You've got a cheaper forward in there, so it's not perfect. You've got a 4.5 million mid. That isn't what I would want to do. So if I was to chuck Fernandes into my draft, I would say goodbye to Ollie Watkins. And then I'm not so sure about those cheaper forwards at the moment, but I do prefer the cheaper mids. So just for me in terms of structure and budget, I'm struggling to get Fernandes in. But yeah, this draft has got Sanchez and Darlow as the keepers. That looks good. Colwill, Porro, Van der Ven, Anderson as Steve. I like that. And then the midfield is Ndiaye, Palmer, Salah, Fernandes, and Ramsey. The midfield four is great if you don't look on the bench at the 4.5. And then Solanke, Watkins, Thiago. I think Thiago, assuming Wissa leaves, is a really shrewd pick at 6 million, by the way. And as long as Solanke's fit to start the season, he'll do really well. So I look at this from Matt. And by the way, I suggest following FPL Matt W on Twitter. He's a great account. I like it. I can't really hugely criticize it. I mean, Fantasy Football Hub, by the way, gave this 97%. 97. This is their favorite draft. I've given it a little bit lower. I slightly disagree, but I do like a lot of the picks. For me, again, if I were to say I want Fernandes in, which is kind of the purpose of this draft here, drop Solanke down or drop Watkins down. I think it would have to be Watkins. So Watkins down to even Jared Bowen just frees up enough money to do Ramsey to Anderson. Or even dropping Watkins down to a 7.5, you can do Ramsey up to a 6 million midfield if you wanted to. You can even go up to someone like Tielemans is a nice pick at 6 million. I just think that would be worth it for me. So yeah, if this was my team final thing, I would do Watkins down to a 7.5, Ramsey up to Anderson, I would get Porro up to Van Dijk, and all of a sudden that starts to look like a stronger overall squad. Let me know if any of you have got Bruno Fernandes in your team. If you have, I'm super jealous. I might even be tempted to chuck a Cunha and Mbeumo in there at that slightly cheaper price. So guys, there you have it, rating 5 drafts that you sent in to me. Thank you to everyone that did send in their team. And again, apologies that I don't get to rate all of your teams. I would love to rate as many as possible. But if you did enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button and make sure to subscribe. If you've got a draft that you want some feedback on, obviously upload it to Fantasy Football Hub. Like I said at the start of the video, just use the link down below, upload it. You'll get a rating out of 100. And then if you want to access more of the features, you can feel free to use my link down below as well. Until next time, thank you very much. Bye-bye.